Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the privilege of sharing a story that transcends ordinary boundaries. A story that exemplifies resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of dreams. This is the story of Joe Ranga, a man whose life is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, adapt, and rise above. Joe's journey was never one paved with comfort or certainty. From humble beginnings, he faced obstacles that would have discouraged even the bravest of hearts. Yet what sets Joe apart is not the hardships he faced, but how he responded to them, with unyielding determination, unwavering focus, and an unbreakable will. His story teaches us that greatness is not measured by success alone, but by the refusal to give up in the face of failure, the courage to take risks when the world doubts you, and the resilience to continue when every door seems closed. Joe Ranga did not merely endure. He transformed challenges into stepping stones, failures into lessons, and setbacks into momentum. Through every trial, Joe reminded us of a profound truth. The human spirit is limitless when fueled by purpose, vision, and relentless action. His life encourages all of us to embrace our struggles, pursue our passions, and never settle for anything less than our full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of Joe Ranga is not just a story to admire, it is a story to live by, a beacon that inspires each one of us to push beyond our limits and become the architects of our own destiny. Joe Ranga's story begins not in luxury or privilege, but in the quiet struggles of humble beginnings. From the very start, life demanded more from him than it did from most. He was born into circumstances where resources were limited, opportunities were scarce, and the path to success seemed almost invisible. In his early years, Joe faced challenges that would have discouraged anyone from dreaming big. He witnessed hardship firsthand, financial instability, societal expectations, and the pressure to conform to a life of mediocrity. These early struggles could have easily shaped a life of resignation or fear, but Joe chose a different path. Even as a young boy, he displayed signs of an indomitable spirit. While others accepted the limitations placed upon them, Joe questioned them, always searching for a way to rise above. He learned quickly that life would not hand him what he wanted. If he wanted to achieve anything meaningful, he had to earn it through relentless effort, careful planning, and unwavering determination. Every small obstacle, whether it was a lack of educational resources, limited mentorship, or societal discouragement, became a lesson in resourcefulness. Joe discovered early that resilience is cultivated in the crucible of hardship. At school, Joe's potential was often overlooked. Teachers and peers sometimes underestimated him because of his background, and the weight of doubt could have been crushing. Yet, instead of letting these perceptions define him, Joe used them as fuel. He became self-reliant, seeking knowledge wherever he could find it, reading voraciously, and observing the world with a keen eye for opportunities that others missed. His curiosity became a shield against the limitations imposed by circumstance, and his hunger for growth created an inner strength that would serve as the foundation for everything to come. Moreover, Joe's early life taught him the value of empathy and perseverance. Seeing his family struggle, he understood the importance of responsibility and sacrifice. These lessons embedded in him a deep sense of purpose. Success was not just personal, it was a means to uplift not only himself but also those around him. The challenges of his formative years, though harsh, shaped Joe into someone who could endure pain, think creatively under pressure, and act decisively when most would falter. Ultimately, Joe's origins and early struggles were not barriers. They were the training ground for resilience, determination, and vision. Each difficulty he faced became a stepping stone, each limitation a spark for innovation, and each doubt cast by others a challenge to prove that where you start does not determine where you can go. His early life was the proving ground of a spirit that refused to be broken, and it is from these experiences that the unyielding Joe Ranga began to emerge. Resilience is often misunderstood as merely enduring hardship, but in Joe Ranga's story it is much deeper. It is the ability to rise stronger, wiser, and more determined every single time life knocks you down. For Joe, resilience was not an abstract idea or a trait he was born with. It was a skill he cultivated through repeated trials, failures, and challenges. Every setback became a test of his character, every disappointment a chance to sharpen his resolve, and every obstacle a stepping stone toward greater achievements. Throughout his life, Joe encountered situations that would have crushed most people. Opportunities he worked tirelessly for were delayed or denied. Plans he meticulously crafted fell apart due to circumstances beyond his control. Critics doubted his abilities, friends questioned his choices, and societal pressures sought to confine him within predefined limits. Yet, instead of surrendering to despair, Joe leaned into these moments, using adversity as a teacher, a motivator, and a proving ground for his inner strength. He understood early on that resilience is built not in comfort, but in the fire of challenge. Resilience for Joe was also about mental flexibility and emotional strength. He learned to manage frustration without letting it consume him, to view failure not as a reflection of his worth but as a signal to adjust his approach, and to remain steadfast when the path ahead seemed impossible. Even in moments of exhaustion, uncertainty, or fear, Joe demonstrated a remarkable ability to maintain focus on his goals, to continue moving forward when others would have stopped, and to believe in the possibility of success when the world offered only doubt. What makes Joe's resilience extraordinary is that it was active, not passive. He did not simply endure difficulties and hope for the best. He took deliberate action to overcome them. He experimented with solutions, sought advice and knowledge, refined his strategies, and refused to let failure define him. In this way, resilience became a proactive force in his life, a conscious commitment to persevere while continually improving, learning, and adapting. Moreover, Joe's resilience inspired those around him. People who witnessed his struggles and triumphs saw not just endurance but an example of how to transform adversity into opportunity. His resilience was contagious. It encouraged others to believe that no matter how insurmountable their own challenges seemed, persistence and determination could shift the balance. In essence, the power of resilience in Joe Ranga's journey was not just about surviving. It was about thriving in the face of adversity, transforming every challenge into fuel for growth, and developing an unshakable confidence in his ability to navigate life's uncertainties. It is this resilience that forms the backbone of his story, and it is what allows him to turn hardships into defining moments of triumph. One of the most defining qualities in Joe Ranga's journey is his ability to see beyond the limitations of the present moment. While many people become trapped by immediate circumstances, financial pressure, temporary failure, or short-term comfort, Joe trained his mind to focus on a future that did not yet exist. This vision became his compass, guiding his decisions even when the path ahead was unclear or painfully difficult. He understood that present pain was not permanent, but vision could be. Joe's life demanded patience long before it rewarded effort. There were moments when progress felt invisible, when days of hard work produced no visible results, and when quitting would have offered instant relief. Yet, Joe resisted the temptation of short-term comfort because he was committed to long-term purpose. He recognized that meaningful success often requires delayed gratification, the willingness to suffer now so that growth can unfold later. This mindset allowed him to make choices that aligned with his future goals, even when those choices were misunderstood by others. Vision for Joe was not blind optimism, it was strategic clarity. He spent time reflecting on where he wanted to go and who he needed to become to get there. When obstacles arose, he did not react impulsively. Instead, he evaluated challenges through the lens of his long-term vision, asking himself whether each setback was a dead end or simply a detour. This ability to think beyond the immediate moment helped him avoid emotional decisions that could derail his progress. Joe also understood that vision must evolve. As he grew, learned, and gained experience, his goals expanded. What began as a desire to escape limitation transformed into a mission to build something meaningful and impactful. Rather than clinging rigidly to outdated plans, he adjusted his direction while keeping his core purpose intact. This adaptability allowed his vision to remain alive and relevant, ensuring that growth never stagnated and ambition never faded. In moments of uncertainty, Joe's vision acted as an anchor. When motivation dipped and exhaustion set in, he returned to the image of the life he was building, not just for himself but for those who believed in him and those who would one day draw inspiration from his journey. This future-focused mindset gave him strength when logic suggested retreat, and courage when fear demanded hesitation. By consistently prioritizing long-term purpose over short-term comfort, Joe Ranga demonstrated that true vision is not about predicting the future, but about committing to it, choosing every day to act in alignment with who you are becoming, even when the present offers no reassurance and no guarantees. Courage played a defining role in Joe Ranga's journey, not as a loud or dramatic display, but as a quiet, persistent force that guided his actions when doubt surrounded him. From early on, Joe learned that doubt does not only come from external voices, it often emerges internally disguised as fear, hesitation, or self-questioning. What set him apart was not the absence of doubt, but his decision to move forward despite it. He understood that courage is not about feeling fearless, it is about choosing progress over paralysis. Throughout his life, Joe encountered skepticism from many directions. People questioned his ambitions, dismissed his ideas as unrealistic, and doubted his ability to rise beyond his circumstances. Some believed his dreams were too large for someone with his background, while others advised him to choose safer, more conventional paths. Instead of allowing these voices to weaken his resolve, Joe listened selectively. He absorbed feedback that helped him grow, but he rejected doubt that sought to limit his potential. In doing so, he cultivated a strong sense of self-belief rooted in action rather than approval. Courage also demanded sacrifice. Joe often had to stand alone in his decisions, choosing paths that were unfamiliar, uncertain, and uncomfortable. There were moments when the easier option would have been to conform, to blend in, or to abandon his ambitions altogether. Yet, Joe consistently chose the harder road, the one that required faith in himself and resilience against criticism. Each courageous choice reinforced his confidence, proving that fear loses its power when confronted with purposeful action. In moments of failure, courage became even more essential. Instead of retreating into silence or shame, Joe faced setbacks openly and continued forward. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, acknowledging mistakes while refusing to let them define him. This form of courage, grounded in humility and perseverance, enabled him to learn, adapt, and try again when others might have stopped entirely. Over time, Joe's courage reshaped how others perceived him. What once appeared risky began to look intentional. What once seemed unrealistic began to feel inevitable. By consistently choosing courage over comfort, Joe Ranga demonstrated that doubt is not an enemy to be eliminated, but a challenge to be confronted, one that, when faced repeatedly, strengthens character and deepens conviction. Failure was not an interruption in Joe Ranga's journey, it was a recurring presence that shaped his growth and sharpened his perspective. Unlike many who view failure as a sign to stop, Joe came to see it as a signal to reflect, recalibrate, and move forward with greater awareness. Each setback carried information, and Joe developed the discipline to study his failures rather than run from them. He understood that success built on unexamined mistakes is fragile, but success forged through failure is resilient. Throughout his path, Joe faced moments when his efforts did not produce the desired outcomes. Projects fell apart, plans collapsed, and expectations went unmet. These moments tested not only his patience but his self-belief. Yet instead of internalizing failure as personal defeat, Joe separated who he was from what went wrong. This distinction allowed him to preserve confidence while still taking full responsibility for improvement. Failure became a classroom, and Joe became a committed student of his own experiences. Joe's approach to failure was rooted in honesty. He resisted the urge to blame circumstances, people, or luck. Instead, he asked difficult questions of himself. What could I have done differently? What did this experience reveal about my preparation, mindset, or strategy? This level of self-examination required courage and humility, but it also accelerated his growth. With every misstep, Joe refined his methods, strengthened his decision-making, and developed a deeper understanding of both his strengths and his limitations. Failure also taught Joe patience and emotional control. Disappointment had the power to derail focus, yet he learned to sit with discomfort without allowing it to define his future actions. He trained himself to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally, recognizing that frustration clouded judgment while reflection sharpened it. Over time, this ability to remain composed under pressure became one of his greatest advantages. As Joe accumulated lessons from repeated failures, his confidence matured. It was no longer based on hope alone but on evidence, proof that he could fail, recover, adapt, and try again. Each failure reduced the fear of the next one, freeing him to take calculated risks and pursue ambitious goals. In this way, failure did not weaken Joe Ranga. It expanded his capacity to grow, to lead, and to persist in the face of uncertainty. Joe Ranga's progress was never the result of chance, luck, or sudden breakthroughs. It was built on an unwavering work ethic that remained consistent even when motivation faded. He understood early on that talent without discipline is unreliable, and ambition without effort is ineffective. While others waited for perfect conditions or external validation, Joe showed up daily, committed to the process regardless of recognition or reward. His work ethic became the silent force that carried him forward when inspiration was absent. Joe approached his responsibilities with intention and structure. He learned to value time as a non-renewable resource, organizing his days around productivity rather than convenience. Late nights, early mornings, and long hours were not sacrifices in his eyes. They were investments in a future he believed in deeply. Even when results were slow or non-existent, Joe maintained his effort, trusting that consistency would eventually compound into progress. What made Joe's work ethic exceptional was its persistence under pressure. During moments of exhaustion or discouragement, He did not lower his standards or compromise his commitment. Instead, he adapted, finding smarter ways to work, refining his focus and prioritizing tasks that aligned with his long-term vision. This ability to sustain effort while adjusting strategy allowed him to remain productive without burning out, proving that true work ethic is not reckless effort, but disciplined endurance. Joe also recognized that effort must be paired with growth. He continually sought to improve his skills, expand his knowledge, and learn from those more experienced than himself. Hard work, to him, was not repetition without reflection. It was deliberate practice guided by self-awareness. Every hour invested carried purpose. Every task performed with intention, reinforcing his belief that mastery is earned through persistent refinement rather than sudden talent. Over time, Joe's unwavering work ethic became a defining characteristic of his identity. It shaped how others perceived him, earned him trust, and created opportunities that could not be manufactured through shortcuts. More importantly, it built internal confidence, the assurance that no matter the challenge ahead, he possessed the discipline and determination required to face it head-on and continue moving forward. Joe Ranga's influence did not come from speeches, titles, or declarations. It emerged naturally through the way he lived his life. Long before people recognized his achievements, they noticed his consistency, his discipline, and his refusal to surrender to circumstances. Joe understood that inspiration is most powerful when it is demonstrated rather than announced. By continuing to move forward in the face of hardship, he became a living example of what perseverance looks like in practice. Those around Joe, friends, colleagues, and even quiet observers, began to draw strength from his journey. Seeing him confront challenges without complaint, recover from setbacks without bitterness, and commit to growth without arrogance created a ripple effect. His actions communicated a powerful message. Progress is possible even when the odds are stacked against you. Without intending to, Joe gave others permission to believe in their own potential simply by refusing to give up on his. Joe's willingness to remain authentic made his impact even deeper. He did not present a polished image of constant success. He allowed people to see the effort, the struggle, and the uncertainty behind his progress. This transparency made his story relatable and accessible. People did not admire him from a distance. They saw themselves in him. His journey showed that strength does not require perfection, only persistence and honesty. As Joe advanced, he became a source of encouragement, not through advice alone but through example. When others faced doubt or failure, his story offered proof that endurance leads to growth. He listened, supported, and motivated through presence rather than pressure. His influence was quiet but steady, shaping mindsets and attitudes over time. In choosing to act with integrity, discipline, and resilience, Joe Ranga demonstrated that leadership does not demand authority, it emerges through consistency. His life became a reference point for others navigating uncertainty, showing that true inspiration is built through action that aligns with values, effort that aligns with purpose, and perseverance that aligns with belief. Joe Ranga's journey is defined not only by what he achieved, but by the spirit with which he lived every chapter of his life. His legacy is rooted in an unyielding mindset, a refusal to surrender identity, ambition, or purpose to hardship. Over time, this mindset became more than a personal trait. It evolved into a lasting imprint that shaped how people understood resilience, discipline, and self-belief. Joe proved that legacy is not something created at the end of life, but something built daily through consistent choices. What makes Joe's legacy powerful is that it was forged in adversity, not comfort. Each challenge he faced added depth to his character and strength to his principles. He did not chase recognition or validation. Instead, he focused on becoming someone who could withstand pressure without losing direction. This internal consistency allowed his values to remain intact regardless of external circumstances, making his journey meaningful beyond measurable success. Joe's unyielding spirit became a reference point for perseverance. People who encountered his story did not see perfection. They saw endurance. They saw someone who fell, stood back up, adjusted, and continued forward with resolve. This repetition of effort, even in uncertainty, reshaped how others viewed struggle. Difficulty was no longer something to avoid but something to grow through. His life communicated that resilience is not dramatic. It is steady, intentional, and deeply personal. Legacy, in Joe's case, was also about influence that extended beyond immediate presence. His approach to challenges, discipline toward growth, and commitment to long-term vision planted ideas in others that continued to grow independently. Whether through direct interaction or quiet observation, his unyielding nature encouraged others to adopt stronger mindsets, embrace responsibility, and pursue purpose without apology. Through consistency, courage, and resilience, Joe Ranga demonstrated that an unyielding spirit does not demand recognition to endure. It lives on through the standards one sets, the example one becomes, and the strength one instills in others simply by refusing to break under pressure. At the core of Joe Ranga's evolution was a deep commitment to self-discipline, a quality that governed his choices long before success ever appeared. Joe understood that motivation is temporary, but discipline is dependable. While emotions fluctuated and circumstances shifted, discipline anchored him to his goals. He trained himself to act based on commitment rather than comfort, choosing consistency even when no one was watching and no immediate reward was guaranteed. Self-discipline for Joe was not about rigid control, it was about intentional living. He learned to regulate his habits, thoughts, and reactions, knowing that unchecked impulses could quietly sabotage long-term progress. Whether it meant sacrificing leisure, resisting distractions, or maintaining focus during monotonous phases, Joe repeatedly chose alignment over indulgence. These daily decisions, seemingly small in isolation, compounded over time into remarkable personal growth. Joe also recognized that discipline begins internally. He worked relentlessly on strengthening his mindset, setting personal standards that were independent of external pressure. He held himself accountable even when failure could be easily justified, and he refused to lower expectations during difficult seasons. This internal accountability allowed him to maintain momentum through uncertainty, ensuring that setbacks did not erode his sense of direction or identity. Through discipline, Joe gained mastery over his craft and his character. He approached improvement as a long-term process, embracing repetition, refinement, and patience. Progress was measured not by speed but by consistency. As others struggled with inconsistency and burnout, Joe's disciplined approach enabled sustainable growth, reinforcing his belief that true mastery is earned through deliberate, focused effort over time. By cultivating self-discipline as a lifestyle rather than a temporary strategy, Joe Ranga demonstrated that control over one's actions is the gateway to control over one's future. His journey shows that when discipline guides decisions, potential is no longer wasted, effort is no longer scattered, and progress becomes inevitable. As Joe Ranga's journey evolved, his drive extended beyond personal ambition into something deeper, a purpose greater than himself. What once began as a desire to overcome limitations gradually transformed into a commitment to create meaning through impact. Joe came to understand that true fulfillment is not found solely in personal achievement, but in using one's strength, experience, and growth to contribute to something larger. This realization reshaped how he viewed success, responsibility, and progress. Joe's purpose became rooted in service through example. He recognized that his struggles, lessons, and perseverance held value beyond his own life. Rather than hoarding success or isolating growth, he allowed his journey to stand as proof that resilience and discipline can change outcomes. This sense of purpose gave his efforts greater weight. Every challenge endured carried significance, knowing that his persistence could influence others facing similar battles. Operating from a greater purpose also strengthened Joe's endurance. When motivation waned or progress slowed, he reminded himself that quitting would not only affect him, it would silence a story that others needed to witness. This awareness elevated his standards and deepened his commitment. His work ethic, discipline, and courage were no longer driven by ego, but by responsibility to the path he had chosen and the people who drew strength from it. Joe also learned that purpose provides clarity during uncertainty. When faced with difficult decisions, he evaluated choices based not on ease or recognition, but on alignment with his deeper values. This clarity allowed him to move forward with confidence, even when outcomes were unclear. Purpose became the filter through which he measured opportunity, ensuring that growth remained meaningful rather than hollow. By anchoring his journey in a purpose greater than himself, Joe Ranga demonstrated that the most powerful fuel for persistence is meaning. When effort serves something beyond personal gain, resilience deepens, discipline strengthens, and the will to continue becomes unshakable. Joe Ranga's journey is a powerful reminder that transformation does not happen in sudden moments of brilliance, but through steady, repeated effort over time. He understood that change is rarely dramatic in the beginning. It is quiet, incremental, and often invisible. While many people abandon their goals because they do not see immediate results, Joe remained committed to consistency, trusting that small actions performed daily would eventually reshape his reality. Consistency became Joe's greatest advantage. On days when motivation was high, he worked with intensity. On days when motivation was absent, he relied on routine. This distinction allowed him to progress regardless of emotional state. He did not wait to feel ready or inspired. He showed up because consistency demanded it. Over time, this discipline created momentum, and momentum created transformation, both externally in his achievements and internally in his mindset. Joe also recognized that consistency builds identity. Every repeated action reinforced who he was becoming. By choosing discipline again and again, he stopped negotiating with his doubts and started trusting his process. This shift was crucial because once consistency becomes part of identity, effort feels less like struggle and more like alignment. His habits began to work for him rather than against him, reducing resistance and increasing focus. Through consistent effort, Joe refined his skills, strengthened his resilience, and sharpened his vision. Mistakes became fewer, decisions clearer, and progress more sustainable. Others may have seen overnight success, but Joe knew the truth, that transformation was the result of countless unnoticed hours of commitment. Consistency turned uncertainty into confidence and effort into mastery. By remaining faithful to the process even when results lagged behind effort, Joe Ranga demonstrated that lasting transformation is earned through patience, repetition, and belief in the power of showing up day after day. Much of Joe Ranga's growth happened away from attention, recognition, or applause. While outward success often draws focus, Joe understood that real strength is developed in silence. During the moments when no one is watching, no one is encouraging, and no one is acknowledging the effort being made. These quiet phases tested his commitment more than public challenges ever could. It was in solitude that Joe confronted his doubts, disciplined his habits, and sharpened his mindset. Working in silence required trust in himself and in the process. There were periods when Joe's dedication went unnoticed and his sacrifices unseen. Progress felt slow and validation was absent. Yet he remained steadfast, recognizing that external recognition is not a prerequisite for internal growth. He continued to invest effort without seeking approval, knowing that consistency in obscurity builds resilience that fame can never provide. Silence also allowed Joe to develop clarity. Without distractions or external noise, he could assess his direction honestly. He reflected deeply on his actions, goals, and values, making adjustments where necessary. This self-awareness strengthened his foundation, ensuring that when opportunities eventually arose, he was prepared both mentally and emotionally to handle them with discipline and humility. The solitude Joe embraced was not isolation, it was intentional focus. He used quiet moments to study, improve, and refine his craft. Every unseen hour added depth to his skill set and stability to his character. This unseen labor created confidence rooted in preparation rather than luck, giving Joe the ability to remain calm and composed under pressure. By committing to growth in silence, Joe Ranga demonstrated that true strength does not demand attention to exist. It is formed quietly through discipline, patience, and unwavering belief, emerging only when the individual is ready to carry it forward with purpose and control. One of the hallmarks of Joe Ranga's journey was his willingness to embrace risk, not recklessly but strategically, as a necessary ingredient for growth. Joe understood that comfort zones may provide safety, but they rarely produce transformation. To achieve something extraordinary, he had to step into uncertainty, challenge assumptions, and take actions that carried the potential for failure as well as success. Risk for Joe was never about thrill or impulse. It was a calculated decision grounded in vision and preparation. He carefully evaluated opportunities, assessed potential consequences, and made choices that aligned with his long-term goals. Yet even with preparation, risk always involved the unknown. Joe's courage to move forward despite uncertainty allowed him to seize opportunities that others were too hesitant to explore. Every calculated risk became a chance to expand his skills, knowledge, and resilience. Throughout his journey, Joe faced moments when the stakes were high, financial, reputational, or emotional, and the pressure to avoid failure was immense. Yet he recognized that avoiding risk often meant avoiding progress. He reframed fear not as a barrier but as a signal that he was pushing beyond familiar limits, and he treated challenges as experiments from which valuable lessons could be learned regardless of outcome. Embracing risk also taught Joe adaptability. Plans do not always unfold as expected, and outcomes are rarely guaranteed. By venturing into uncertainty, he learned to pivot quickly, make decisions under pressure, and recover gracefully from setbacks. This ability to respond dynamically rather than freeze in hesitation became a defining strength in his personal and professional growth. Moreover, Joe's willingness to take risks inspired those around him. By demonstrating that growth requires stepping into the unknown, he encouraged others to reconsider their own fears and limitations. He showed that true progress is born from action, not hesitation, and that courage to risk, even in the face of possible failure, is essential for anyone who seeks to achieve meaningful results. Through embracing risk, Joe Ranga illustrated that growth is not safe, comfortable, or predictable. It is earned through bold, decisive action guided by preparation, vision, and the willingness to face uncertainty with confidence. Joe Ranga's journey is not defined by a single victory, a moment of recognition, or an effortless achievement. It is defined by the unwavering spirit that refused to bend, the resilience that turned setbacks into lessons, and the relentless commitment to growth, purpose, and integrity. His life teaches us that success is not handed to those who wait. It is earned by those who persist, adapt, and act with courage even when the world doubts them. Through his struggles, triumphs, and constant reinvention, Joe Ranga shows that greatness is not about perfection, but about perseverance. Not about shortcuts, but about discipline. Not about fleeting moments, but about building a legacy that inspires others. He reminds us that every challenge, every failure, and every moment of doubt is an opportunity to rise stronger, think clearer, and act bolder. Joe Ranga's story is a call to action, a reminder that we each possess the power to shape our future, overcome obstacles, and leave a lasting impact. If we approach life with the same resilience, vision, and unyielding spirit that he has demonstrated, there is no limit to what we can achieve. His journey is proof that when determination meets purpose and courage meets commitment, triumph is not just possible, it is inevitable.